Understand that in a region where we will always be a minority, natural alliances will be formed with other minorities. That's what the Israeli Minister of Foreign Affairs said in November 2024, shortly before the fall of Assad's Syria and the reshaping of the balance of power in the Middle East, as we saw in previous videos. This strategy of ethnic and religious minorities is not new and has already been used before, particularly by the British and the French against the Ottoman Empire, which ultimately led to its breakup in 1919. Since then, the religious and ethnic minorities of the Middle East, Jews, Maronites, Druze, Kurds, or Alawites, have from time to time recognized their common interests and have tried to unite in their opposition to the Sunni majority. Today, the balance of power is being played out in Syria, where supporters of this strategy in Israel have called for an alliance between the region's minorities to stand against Turkish influence. In Syria, the political situation is explosive. The Alawites have already been victims of early massacres. Clashes between Druze militiamen and the new Syrian authority are increasing, as is Israeli military pressure, with troops still just a few kilometers from Damascus and regular strikes continuing as a warning. Israeli opportunism, the disintegration of the Syrian state, you're on terra bellum. And today we're going to look together at Israel's plan and the minority strategy in Assyria, where the civil war never really ended. A country's actions can't be understood without considering its geography. Since its creation in 1948, Israel has faced a fundamental vulnerability, its lack of strategic depth. With an area of 22,145 square kilometers and a minimum width of 15 kilometers between the city of Netanya and the West Bank, Israel offers little room for maneuver compared to countries like Iran or Turkey. A rocket launched from Gaza can reach Tel Aviv in less than 90 seconds, and a jet can cross the country in 10 minutes. These geographical constraints are exacerbated by the presence of adversaries on several fronts today: Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in the south, and an unstable Syria filled with militias less than 50 kilometers from Haifa. To compensate for this disadvantage, Israel therefore uses several levers. First of all, mandatory military service for men and women, starting at age 18 for a period of 2 to 3 years, which then allows for the creation of a reserve force of about 450,000 soldiers. For example, in October 2023, Israel mobilized more than 300,000 reservists in just a few days. The country has also invested 5 to 6% of its GDP in the defense budget since the early 2000s. A graph is worth 1,000 words. Here is the percentage of GDP invested in defense according to the World Bank from 2000 to 2023. Compare here with Russia at war, Israel, which is at war, and the United States and France. Israel also has a doctrine that, to put it simply, consists of striking first, so in a preventive manner, like the strikes on the equipment and infrastructure of the former Syrian army during the fall of Assad, or the resumption of hostilities before the second phase of the ceasefire in Gaza. Israel also has some of the most effective intelligence services in the world, including the Mossad for foreign intelligence, the Shin Bet for internal security, and Unit 8200 for cyber. Their effectiveness is based on a tense geopolitical context, which requires constant vigilance, advanced technologies, extensive human networks, and bold operations, such as the targeted assassination of opposing figures. And finally, there is the strategic alliance with the United States, which provides an average of $3.8 billion in annual military aid, according to the agreements from 2016 to 2026, not to mention intelligence sharing, and so on. All of this stems from geography and makes sense for Israel, but it also shows its limits when facing prolonged asymmetric conflicts. Without strategic depth, Israel must maintain the initiative to avoid attrition. As I often say in my videos, Israel always tries to strike fast and hard with all the consequences that come with it, whether good or bad. Some Israeli leaders advocate for regional alliances, aiming to deconflict Israel's immediate environment. This initiative is supported by the United States, as was the case with the Camp David Accords, with Egypt, then with Jordan, and the Abraham Accords. But even this normalization of relations between states does not resolve the country's fundamental geographic vulnerability, facing much larger neighbors, and that's where the Periphery Doctrine comes in. To understand the Periphery Doctrine, we have to go back to the 1950s under Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion. This doctrine was one of the 4 pillars of Israel's initial security strategy. Alongside forming alliances with major powers such as France, Great Britain, the Federal Republic of Germany, and later the United States, promoting Jewish immigration to strengthen demographic leverage and creating nuclear deterrence. In the 1950s, Israel also formed strategic partnerships with non-Arab states in the region, such as Turkey, Iran, and Ethiopia, in order to counter the Arab diplomatic and economic boycott and to respond to the rise of Arab nationalism embodied by Egyptian President Nasser. However, this doctrine eroded at the end of the 1970s, especially after the Islamic Revolution in Iran, which led Ayatollah Khomeini to break ties with Israel. The creation of Hezbollah by Iran also coincided with the invasion of Lebanon in 1982. In this war, the Christian militias of the pro-Israeli phalangists committed major abuses and killed thousands of Palestinian civilians. The Sabra and Shatila massacre caused an international outcry, with strong opposition in Israel and around the world, while declassified American diplomatic documents in 2018 confirmed that the Israeli army on the ground facilitated the massacre. These events pushed Israel to reconsider its support in the region, or at least to do so in a more subtle way. In Turkey as well, Israel has never been popular, and political Islam surged, with the creation of the Welfare Party by Erbakan in 1983. In 2001, one of his former supporters, Erdogan, founded the Justice and Development Party, which would come to power and mark the end of the golden age of the Israel-Turkey partnership that I already mentioned in a previous video. Alongside this doctrine of the peripheries, there is the doctrine of minorities. Israel continued to support the Druze minority in Syria and the Kurds in Iraq. Since 1956, military service has been mandatory for Druze men with Israeli citizenship, which sets them apart from other Israeli Arabs. This privilege is not insignificant and was accompanied in the 1970s, after the occupation of the Syrian Golan, by support for the creation of a Druze state to form a buffer zone with Syria. The Syrian Druze, who live in regions of the Golan Heights and Jabal al-Druze, are strategically positioned to establish a barrier up to the Lebanese border. Meanwhile, Israeli-Kurdish contacts began in the early 1960s when the Iraqi Kurds attempted to secede from the Iraqi state. Israel and its partner at the time, Iran, had sent military instructors to northern Iraq to train Kurdish militiamen in combat and guerrilla warfare. This presence even became permanent from 1965 onwards against the Iraqi state. After the fall of Saddam Hussein in 2003, and after the Kurds gained broad autonomy in Iraq, Israeli-Kurdish relations deepened considerably. Reports indicate that Mossad has a significant presence in Iraqi Kurdistan. That's why in the 2000s and the 2010s, Israel still tried to reactivate the Periphery Doctrine by establishing new strategic partners. This strategy includes alliances with countries such as India, Greece, South Sudan, and Azerbaijan. India has become a major defense partner with arms sales and joint exercises. Greece and Cyprus are also key allies for Israel in the Eastern Mediterranean, allowing Israel to strengthen its position. Facing Turkey, South Sudan also offers a strategic presence in Africa, while Azerbaijan provides access to the Caucasus and allows monitoring of Iran, which also has an Azeri minority. In Central Asia, Israel has renewed ties with countries like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan, thus strengthening its presence in the region. This strategy is actually aimed at bypassing regional adversaries and diversifying Israel's alliances, but it still faces persistent challenges from leadership changes or new political and religious claims, as was the case with Turkey and Iran in the past. Now we come to the Syrian situation. The fall of Assad presents a new challenge for Israel. In addition to the Iranian adversary, there is now the Turkish adversary. Israel now fears that the new Syrian leadership could facilitate the creation of hostile entities that would directly threaten its northern border. Whether it's Foreign Minister Guy Gideon Saar or Benjamin Netanyahu, all have emphasized that Israel must, I quote, reach out to the Syrian minorities, mainly the Druze and the Kurds. Of course, this is a self-interested gesture. The relationship between Israel and the Syrian Kurds is complex and has only recently evolved. Under the Assad family, the centralization of power and the rigidity of the regime favored the political exclusion of Syrian Kurds, even their Arabization, forced, in order to consolidate a Syrian Arab state along the Turkish and Iraqi borders to separate the Syrian Kurds from their counterparts in those two countries. Syria has always suffered from weak geographical legitimacy, inherited from the French Mandate, a lack of unity, and a location that makes it vulnerable to the ambitions of its neighbors. And this became evident with the end of the Assad dynasty. With the civil war, the Syrian Kurds gained political and military autonomy. In 2024, after the fall of al-Assad, the Syrian Kurds expressed interest in a strategic alliance with Israel. Meanwhile, the Israeli Minister of Foreign Affairs emphasized the importance of supporting the Kurds, who are considered, I quote, natural allies for Israel. This alliance could boost Israel's presence in northeastern Syria and offer the Kurds support against Turkish and Iranian threats. However, everything should be kept in perspective. Syria has fallen back into the Turkish sphere of influence, which will seek to limit Israeli influence over the Kurds. The Syrian Kurds are torn between reconciliation with the new Syrian Authority and an alliance with Israel, which may be tempting, but could also have fatal consequences. Because at the same time, the PKK announced a historic ceasefire in Turkey, and the party's founder called for an end to the armed struggle. This will be closely watched in Syria and will shape the future of Syrian Kurdistan. Israel, for its part, says it also wants to protect the Druze from potential threats posed by a new Syrian government, even though the latter has not officially shown any hostility toward them. Syrian Druze have even visited Israel for the first time in 50 years, marking a new stage in relations between the two sides. Some see Israeli aid as an opportunity for protection against potential threats from the new Syrian government, and as a chance to form a real Druze state. Others fear becoming pawns in a much larger geopolitical game, with disastrous consequences that would follow, so they prefer more autonomy with the Syrian government rather than allying with a foreign power and seceding. But Israel also wants to give a little boost, and has targeted Syrian government positions in the regions of Quneitra, Daraa, and south of Damascus, while encouraging the Syrian Druze to form a canton that could serve as a first line of defense in southern Syria. As you know, Israeli forces have entered this buffer zone, occupying the strategic summit of Mount Hermon, less than 18 kilometers from Damascus. Israel has three objectives. Southern Syria has been an important route for weapons from Iran and Hezbollah to the West Bank, and it is making sure to block these supply routes. Also, the Israeli military presence in Syria aims to force the hand of the Druze, giving them the opportunity to establish a federation. This Druze federation would also, in effect, strengthen the legitimacy of the Kurdish Federation in the northeast of the country. This would encourage the breakup of Syria, which could then prompt the Alawites to seek Israeli protection and move toward creating a coastal state. Finally, its incursion into the south of the country aims to block any future Syrian demand to recover the occupied Golan Heights. Israel would absolutely have the ability to impose new security realities and to expand the demilitarized zone to include all of southern Syria. You see, Israel's strategy is simple: to prevent the formation of a unified regional bloc against it, whether it is nationalist, Shiite, Sunni, Iranian, or Turkish. By supporting separatist projects in the region, Israel increases the diversity of the actors surrounding it, because the more homogeneous the region becomes, the more vulnerable Israel becomes. By creating alliances with minority groups, Israel is also trying to block Turkish efforts to establish groups or activities in southern Syria that could be used as bargaining chips in negotiations. Not to mention that the diversity of political and religious entities, rather than large Sunni states in the region, also helps to legitimize the presence of Israel, the presence of a Hebrew state. At the same time, as you can see, this strategy aligns with the creation of strategic depth and the disappearance of the West Bank and Gaza Strip to form a single, homogeneous Israeli state. The recent clashes between Druze militias and the Syrian authorities in Damascus are strong signals that further reinforce Israel in its strategy to facilitate a Druze secession, or, at the very least, to form a demilitarized buffer zone. Although the Israeli Minister of Defense spoke of a temporary presence in the region, It is politically naive to believe that the Israeli army would abandon the summit of Mount Hermon, which is highly strategic in the short term. Netanyahu himself said it, "We are here for eternity." I hope this brief analysis of the situation, remember from Israel's point of view, has been helpful to you. It would also be interesting to address the situation regarding Turkish interests or those of the Arab countries. Rest assured, I'll return to the region soon. As with all conflicts and political issues, this is a sensitive topic and may not please YouTube. For example, the video about India and Pakistan was restricted, even though we strive to maintain ethics and aim for objective analysis. So this channel essentially depends on you once our videos are posted, whether it's to go back and watch the previous topics we've covered. And since we're not supported by YouTube's trending button, we also don't have any media sponsorship to support us, and it's been like this since 2018. Fortunately, there are simple gestures, like share your thoughts in the comments on how the situation in Syria may develop. Local subscribers' perspectives would be especially interesting. Geopolitics interests us all. Also, so don't forget to share this video. It's always a bit cliche to say this, but it really makes a difference, because the YouTube algorithm changes regularly, and it literally supports the dozens of hours of work we put into each video. The next Terabellum magazine issue is coming soon after a delay due to problems with our hosting provider. Sorry for the wait, but it will be available. Thanks to our YouTube members for your financial support, and thanks to all of you for your loyalty. This was Quentin for Terabellum. See you next time.